For thousands of years, Zen masters realized something remarkable about finding peace. The storms of life are not just obstacles to our peace, but teachers. Tonight, we will journey through ancient stories about people who learned to stop fighting against life and flow with it instead. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. These are not lessons you need to memorize or techniques you must master. They are simply invitations to remember what your heart already knows about peace. These stories will simply unfold, one after another, like gentle waves. And as they do, you may notice your mind becoming quieter, your body releasing tension you did not know you were carrying. So, settle completely now. Let your body grow heavy. There is nowhere else you need to be. Relax. Take a slow, deep breath. And let's begin our journey together. In a village nestled between mountains and dense forest, there lived a gardener named Sora. His small cottage sat behind a garden so vibrant, so alive with color and fragrance that travelers would often pause at his gate just to breathe in the beauty. Crimson peonies nodded beside golden chrysanthemums. White jasmine climbed wooden trellises, releasing its sweetness into the evening air. Even in the depths of winter, something was always blooming in Sora's garden. This would have been remarkable anywhere. But in this particular village, it seemed almost impossible. The region was known for its harsh weather. Storm clouds gathered frequently over the mountains, bringing winds that could strip leaves from branches and rain that fell so hard it turned pathways into rivers of mud. Other villagers struggled to keep even the hardiest plants alive. Yet, Sora's garden thrived. One autumn afternoon, as leaves began their slow turn from green to amber and rust, a young traveler named Daichi arrived in the village. He had been walking for many days, mind might finally settle. Someone at the inn mentioned Sora's garden. "You should see it before you continue your journey," they said. "Especially if you are looking for something unusual. There is a quality to that place that words don't quite capture." Daichi found the cottage easily enough. The riot of colors was visible even from the road. He opened the simple wooden gate and stepped inside. The change was immediate. The air felt different here. Quieter somehow, despite the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of wind moving through the valley. Sora was kneeling beside a bed of late-blooming asters, his hands deep in dark soil. He was an older man, his face lined with years of sun and weather, but his movements were gentle and unhurried. He looked up as Daichi approached and offered a slight nod of welcome. "Your garden is beautiful," Daichi said. The words felt inadequate. "I have never seen flowers so healthy in a region with such difficult weather." Sora wiped his hands on his cotton work robe and stood slowly. "You are kind to notice." He gestured toward a low bench beneath a flowering plum tree. "Please, sit if you like." Daichi Saturday. From this angle, he could see the full scope of the garden. Every section was thriving. Nothing looked stressed or struggling. "How do you do it?" he asked. "Everyone says the storms here are brutal. Yet your plants seem to welcome them." "The storms are indeed fierce," Sora agreed. He settled onto the bench beside his visitor. "Especially in spring and autumn. The wind can be strong enough to bend young trees nearly to the ground. The rain often comes in sheets that blur the whole world to grey. Then surely you must protect your garden somehow? Special coverings? A wall to break the wind? Sora smiled softly. I protect nothing. Daichi looked around again, confused. But then how do your flowers survive when others do not? They survive because they do not resist, Sora said. Watch a flower in the rain sometime. Really watch it. The petals receive each drop. The stem bends with the wind, but does not break. The roots drink deeply of the water that others call destructive. He paused, letting his words settle like seeds in soil. Most gardeners see the storm and think only of damage. They rush to cover their plants, to shield them, to keep the weather away. But in doing so, they keep their flowers weak. A plant that never meets the wind never learns to strengthen its stem. A flower that never tastes the harsh rain never develops the resilience to truly thrive. Daichi felt something shift in his chest. He had been thinking of his own struggles, his own life's difficulties, as things to be avoided or overcome as quickly as possible. So the storm teaches the flower? He asked. The storm reveals what the flower already possesses, Sora replied. Strength, adaptability, the capacity to bend without breaking. These qualities do not come from easy days. They emerge when something challenges the plant to grow deeper, stronger, more rooted in what it truly is. They sat in silence for a moment. A light breeze moved through the garden, and Daichi watched how the flowers swayed. Not fighting the movement, just dancing with it. Is this true for people as well? Daichi asked quietly. The difficulties we face, the storms in our own lives. Are these also teachers? Sora turned to look at him directly. What do you think? When has your life taught you the most? During the easy times when everything went as planned? Or during the difficult times when nothing went as you hoped? Daichi thought about his own journey, the losses that had sent him wandering, the disappointments that had broken his old certainties, the confusion that had finally made him stop and question what he truly wanted. All of it had been painful, but all of it had also been necessary. The difficult times, he admitted, though I would not have chosen them. Of course not, Sora said gently. The flower does not choose the storm either. But when the storm comes, as storms always do, the flower has a choice in how it meets that moment. It can resist, stiffen, try to remain exactly as it was. Or it can receive, bend, allow itself to be touched and changed by what arrives. He gestured toward his garden. This is what you see here. Not flowers that have avoided difficulty, but flowers that have learned to be present with difficulty, to meet it fully, to let it shape them into something stronger and more beautiful than they could have become in endless sunshine. As Daichi prepared to leave, the sky was beginning to darken with the promise of rain. He paused at the gate and looked back. Sora had returned to his work, kneeling once more in the soil, completely absorbed in the simple act of tending. Thank you, Daichi called out. Sora looked up and smiled. The teaching is not mine. The garden offers it freely to anyone willing to observe. Safe travels, young friend. May you find peace in whatever weather comes. That evening, as rain began to fall on the inn where Daichi was staying, he found himself at the window watching. He thought of Sora's flowers receiving each drop. He thought of stems bending but not breaking. And for the first time in many months, he felt something like gratitude for the storms that had brought him to this moment, this place, this beginning of understanding. The story of Sora and his garden points us towards something essential in Zen practice. The understanding that our difficulties are not separate from our path, but are the path itself. That presence, true mindful awareness, does not mean existing only in pleasant moments. It means learning to be fully awake in all moments, including the challenging ones. Consider how often you approach difficulties in your life. Do you meet them directly, or do you spend your energy wishing they were not happening? The difference is profound. When you resist what is already present, you add a second layer of suffering to the original difficulty. The situation itself plus your fight against the situation existing. Sora's flowers teach something important here. They do not waste energy protesting the rain. They simply respond to what arrives. This is not passive acceptance in the sense of giving up. It is active presence. Meeting each moment with full awareness rather than partial attention divided between what is happening and what you wish were happening instead. Think about the times you have grown most as a person. The moments when you discovered inner resources you did not know you possessed. Often these discoveries come through challenge, through being pressed beyond your comfort, through having to reach deeper than you thought possible. This is the storm acting as teacher. But here is something subtle that Sora understood. The teaching is not in the storm itself. A storm is just weather. The teaching emerges through your relationship with the storm, through how you meet it, through whether you can remain present with difficulty rather than fragmenting into resistance and fear. Mindfulness practice trains exactly this capacity. When you sit quietly and observe your breath, you are not trying to create a perfect, peaceful state. You are learning to stay present with whatever arises. Comfort or discomfort, clarity or confusion, calm or restlessness. All of it becomes your practice when you meet it with awareness instead of judgment. The rain falls on Sora's garden and on the gardens of those who frantically cover their plants. The same rain, but the response creates entirely different results. One garden learns strength through meeting the weather. The other remains fragile, dependent on constant protection. Your own difficulties work the same way. You cannot control whether storms come, but you can choose how you stand within them. Stiff and resistant, or flexible and aware. Fighting against reality, or breathing with it. Believing the storm should not be happening, or acknowledging that it is happening and asking what it might teach. This is not easy. Presence with difficulty requires practice. Your mind will want to escape into distraction, into stories about why this should not be occurring, into fantasies of when it will end. But each time you notice this movement away and gently return to simply being present with what is, you are strengthening exactly the quality Sora saw in his flowers. The capacity to bend without breaking. To remain rooted while everything above ground moves and changes. There is a peace available in this. Not the peace of having no problems, but the peace of not adding the extra burden of resistance to whatever problems exist. The flower in the rain is simply a flower in the rain. It does not carry the additional weight of believing it should be a flower in sunshine. And in that simplicity, that direct meeting of what is, there is a kind of grace. Let your breathing soften now as we move to our second story. Feel how your body already knows this wisdom. Your lungs do not resist the exhale, holding desperately to air. They release, They trust the next inhale will come. This natural rhythm continues whether you think about it or not. Presence, release, renewal. The same cycle that moves through Sora's garden moves through you. In a monastery hidden among snow-covered peaks, a young monk named Taro had been given a simple task. Each afternoon, he was to dust and clean the meditation hall where the community gathered for practice. It was quiet work, meditative in its own way, and Taro took pride in keeping the space immaculate. The hall itself was spare. Smooth wooden floors, white walls, simple cushions arranged in neat rows. But in the corner, set in a small alcove, rested a porcelain vase that was the single ornament in the entire room. It was ancient, delicate, with paintings of cranes flying across a pale blue glaze. The vase had been a gift to the monastery centuries ago from an emperor whose name had been lost to time, but whose generosity was still remembered. Everyone who saw the vase remarked on its beauty. The way light seemed to glow through the thin porcelain, the graceful curve of its form, the skill of the artist who had painted those cranes with such precise brushstrokes. It was treated with reverence, this fragile piece of history holding its place in the corner, reminding everyone who entered that beauty and impermanence could exist side by side. Taro understood the vase's value. He was always especially careful when dusting near it. Slow movements, gentle cloth, complete attention. For months, nothing had gone wrong. The vase remained exactly as it had been for generations, perfect and untouched. Then came an autumn afternoon when everything changed in a single moment. Taro was working his way around the room as usual. The cloth moved across the wooden shelf beneath the vase. His mind was calm, or so he thought. But outside, a sudden noise broke through the silence. A tree branch cracking under the weight of early snow. The sound was sharp and unexpected. Taro's attention turned toward the window. Just for a second. Just long enough for his hand to move a fraction too far. The cloth caught the base of the vase. The ancient porcelain tipped, wobbled, then fell. The sound of it breaking on the wooden floor was not loud. Just a quiet, shattering, almost polite. Taro stood very still. He looked down at the fragments scattered across the floor. Pieces of pale blue glaze. Bits of painted cranes, now separated forever from their flock. Centuries of careful preservation ended by his single moment of distraction. He knelt among the pieces, unsure what to do. His mind grew quiet in an unfamiliar way, as if the breaking had opened a space where his usual thoughts could not quite reach. He simply looked at what had happened, at what could not be undone. He did not hear the footsteps approaching, did not notice his teacher, Master Genko, entering the hall until the old monk was standing beside him, looking down at the scattered fragments. Taro's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Master, I have broken something precious." Master Genko was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt down beside his student. The old monk's face held no anger. Instead, there was something that looked almost like gentleness. "Tell me," Genko said softly, "what do you see here on the floor?" Taro looked at the fragments again, confused by the question. "I see a vase that I have broken, a treasure that is now in pieces." "Look more carefully." Taro observed the scattered pieces. At first, he saw only what was lost. But as his eyes moved from fragment to fragment, he began to notice details he had never seen when the vase was whole. The thickness of the porcelain in some places, paper-thin in others. The way the blue glaze pooled darker in the crevices of the painted cranes. The craftsmanship visible in each tiny piece, the skill required to create something so delicate that it could survive centuries but not one careless moment. Each piece holds its own beauty, Genko observed. See how the light catches this fragment differently than it did when the vase was whole? See how you can observe the technique of the potter in ways that were hidden before? But it is broken, Taro said quietly. Its purpose is gone. Its purpose as a vase is gone, Genko agreed. But who decided that was its only purpose? For centuries, this object taught everyone who saw it about beauty and impermanence. It reminded us that all created things are temporary. And now, in its broken state, it teaches something new. Perhaps something even more important. Genko picked up one of the larger fragments, turning it slowly in his weathered hands. When the vase was whole, we admired it. We honored it. But we also held it at a distance, afraid to touch it, afraid our human presence might somehow diminish its perfection. We loved the vase, but we loved it as something separate from ourselves, something above us. He placed the fragment gently in Taro's palm. Now look at it. You can hold it. Examine it closely. See the human hands that shaped this clay, the human breath that painted these cranes. The vase has become more intimate in its brokenness, more honest somehow. But what use are broken pieces? Taro asked. That depends on what you mean by use. These fragments could be arranged into something new. A mosaic, perhaps. A different kind of art made from what remains. Or they could simply rest here as they are, teaching us that endings are not failures. That letting go of one form creates space for something else to emerge. Genko stood slowly, his old knees creaking. I will tell you something, Taro. This vase has been sitting in that corner for longer than either of us has been alive. Generation after generation of monks dusted it, admired it, told stories about it. But very few of them truly looked at it. It had become an idea more than an object. A symbol of our history, our refinement, our connection to an imperial past. And now it is gone, Taro said. And now it is transformed. The vase you knew no longer exists. But these fragments exist. This moment exists. This teaching exists. All of this has emerged from the breaking. Are you certain that what exists now is less valuable than what existed before? Taro sat with this question. His mind wanted to insist that yes, obviously, the intact vase was more valuable. But something deeper in him recognized a truth in what his teacher was suggesting. The vase, as it was, had been beautiful, but static. Fixed in its perfection, unable to offer anything new. But this moment felt alive in a way that dusting an ancient treasure never had. What should I do with the pieces? He asked, finally. That is for you to decide. They are yours now in a way they never were before. This moment has connected you to this object more deeply than centuries of careful preservation ever could. You might create something with them. You might simply keep them as a reminder. Or you might let them go entirely. But whatever you choose, let it come from understanding rather than regret. Genko moved toward the door, then paused. There is an old teaching about a cup that is already broken. Do you know it? Taro shook his head. A master once said that he could enjoy his teacup fully because he understood that it was already broken. Not that it would break someday, but that it was already broken in this very moment. Its brokenness was not a future event, but a present reality. The cup was temporary, fragile, destined to return to dust. And seeing this clearly, he could appreciate it without clinging, love it without fear of loss. Because the loss was already included in the cup's existence, Taro said slowly. Yes, every created thing carries its ending within it. Every form is temporary. When you broke this vase, you did not damage something permanent. You simply revealed what was always true. The vase was always in the process of returning to fragments. We just had not seen it yet. After his teacher left, Taro remained on the floor for a long time. He gathered the pieces carefully, one by one. As he worked, his relationship with them shifted. At first, they had been evidence of what was lost. Then they had become fragments of beauty he could finally touch and examine closely. And now, as he held them, they felt like teachers showing him something about the nature of all things. Nothing lasts. Not vases. Not monasteries. Not bodies or lives or moments. Everything that comes together eventually comes apart. This is not a flaw in the design of the world. It is simply how things are. And perhaps the wisdom is not in preventing the breaking, but in learning to hold even precious things lightly enough that when they transform, we can witness the transformation with understanding. 3 days later, the other monks arrived for evening meditation to find something new in the corner where the vase had stood. Taro had arranged the fragments on a simple wooden platform, not trying to recreate the original form, but allowing the pieces to rest as they were. Broken but beautiful. Imperfect but honest. And beside them, a small card with words from Master Genko. Nothing is wasted. Everything teaches. This story speaks to one of the deepest challenges in human experience. Our relationship with impermanence. We live in a world where everything we love is temporary. Every person we care about will eventually be separated from us. Every object we cherish will wear out or break. Every moment we enjoy will give way to the next moment. And we spend enormous energy trying to prevent this truth from touching us. We hold tightly to what we have, as if our grip could stop time. We make rules and systems to preserve what we value. We feel surprised when things end, as if change were not the most natural movement in the world. And in all this holding on, this resistance to transformation, we create a heaviness that goes beyond the natural sadness of loss. The vase in its wholeness represented this kind of holding. Perfect and preserved, but also distant, untouchable, frozen in a single form. When it broke, something more than porcelain shattered. An illusion broke as well. The illusion that anything can remain unchanged. That perfection can be maintained forever. That careful enough attention can somehow stop the flow of time. Master Genko understood something that Taro was just beginning to learn. That letting go is not giving up. It is seeing clearly. When you recognize that everything you hold is already in the process of changing, already moving toward its eventual transformation, you can begin to appreciate things differently. Not with desperate clutching, but with open appreciation of moments that are precious exactly because they will not last. This does not mean becoming cold or detached. Something beautiful had ended. The natural response to that includes sadness. But beneath that natural feeling, there was an opportunity to understand something liberating. That endings do not erase the value of what existed. The vase's centuries of beauty were not destroyed by its breaking. They happened. They were real. And now something else was happening, equally real, equally part of the flowing nature of existence. When you hold things lightly, you can actually enjoy them more fully. The master drinking tea from a cup he knows is already broken can savor that tea without anxiety about potential loss. He knows loss is not potential. It is certain. But this certainty does not diminish his pleasure. It deepens it. Each sip becomes more precious because he understands its temporary nature. Your own life is filled with precious things that carry their endings within them. Relationships that will change. Health that will shift. Capabilities that will evolve. Every breath you take moves you forward through time. This is not something to fear. This is simply true. And when you can meet this truth without adding stories about how it should be different, something shifts. You might discover that you can love more freely when you know that love includes eventual change. That you can appreciate your body more fully when you understand it is always in the process of transformation. That experiences become more vivid when you recognize their unrepeatable nature. Each thing becomes itself more completely when you stop trying to make it permanent. The fragments of the vase showed something the whole vase never could. They revealed the human hands that shaped the clay, the labor and skill required to create something beautiful, the vulnerability inherent in all created things. When the vase was perfect, it seemed to exist outside of the natural world somehow. But broken, it returned to being what it always was. Clay shaped by human effort. Beautiful because of that effort, not in spite of it. This is true of your own life as well. The places where things have fallen apart, where plans have changed, where perfection has given way to something more honest. These are not failures. They are simply the places where the truth of your humanity shows most clearly, where pretense falls away and what remains is the honest reality of being alive in a world where everything changes. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. Taro still cared deeply about the vase, even in fragments. But caring without clinging creates a different quality of relationship. One that can include loss without being overwhelmed by it. One that can appreciate beauty without needing to freeze it in place. One that can love fully while understanding that love exists in time, and time brings change. The invitation here is to develop a kind of flexibility in how you hold your life. To recognize that the things you grip most tightly are often the things that suffer most from your grip. Like holding sand, the tighter your fist, the more slips through your fingers. But hold your hand open, and the sand rests there naturally, free to be exactly what it is. In a village tucked into the foothills where mountain streams fed rice paddies and cherry trees lined the roads, there stood the workshop of Masato. He was a wheelwright, one of the few remaining craftsmen who still made cartwheels by hand. His small shop smelled of wood shavings and oil, and the sound of his tools against wood was a familiar rhythm in the village's daily life. Masato was known throughout the region, not just for the quality of his wheels, but for something harder to name. People who visited his workshop often commented on the atmosphere of the place. there was a quality of calm that seemed to emanate from the old craftsman as he worked. Even on the busiest market days when farmers came rushing in with broken carts needing immediate repair, Masato maintained a steadiness that was almost palpable. One spring morning, a young monk named Isamu came to the workshop. He was from a small temple in the next valley, and he had been sent by his teacher with a simple message: "Go watch Masato work and learn what he has to teach." Isamu was confused by this instruction. He was studying meditation and Buddhist texts. What could he possibly learn from watching a wheelwright? But he trusted his teacher, so he made the journey. When he arrived, Masato was at his workbench, shaping a piece of wood that would become part of a wheel's rim. His movements were unhurried, but precise. Each stroke of the plane removed a thin curl of wood. Each measurement was carefully checked. The craftsman worked as if he had all the time in the world, though Isamu could see several unfinished wheels waiting in various stages of completion. "Excuse me, Master Masato," Isamu said politely. "My teacher sent me to observe your work. May I watch?" Masato looked up and smiled. "Of course. Sit anywhere you like. I will be working on this wheel for most of the day." Isamu found a stool in the corner and settled in to watch. At first, he was interested in the technical aspects of wheel making, how the spokes were fitted into the hub, how the rim was bent and joined. But as the hours passed, his attention shifted. He began to notice not what Masato was doing, but how he was doing it. The wheelwright's attention never wavered from the immediate task. When he was measuring, he was only measuring. When he was cutting, he was only cutting. When he paused to examine his work, that examination received his complete focus. There was no sense of him thinking ahead to the next step or back to the previous one. He was simply here, with this piece of wood, in this moment. Isamu, in contrast, found his mind constantly wandering. He would watch Masato for a few minutes, then find himself thinking about his studies, or about a disagreement he had had with another monk the previous week, or about what he would eat for lunch, or about whether he was learning what he was supposed to be learning by sitting here. His body was present in the workshop, but his mind was scattered across time and space. By midday, when Masato paused to eat a simple meal of rice and pickles, Isamu could not contain his curiosity any longer. "Master Masato, forgive my question, but I have been watching you all morning, and I noticed something. You seem to be completely absorbed in your work. Your mind never seems to wander. How do you maintain such focus?" Masato chewed his rice thoughtfully before answering. "I do not think of it as focus. That word suggests effort, as if I am forcing my attention to stay in one place. What I do is simpler than that. I am simply with the wheel, with this particular piece of wood, with this exact moment of shaping it. But surely your mind sometimes thinks ahead, about the next step, about how the finished wheel will look?" "Sometimes," Masato admitted, "but when I notice my mind has moved away from what I am actually doing, I bring it back. Not with force, just with gentle attention, like guiding a child who has wandered off the path. The child is not doing anything wrong by wandering, but the path is here, and this is where we are walking." He set down his bowl and picked up the piece of wood he had been working on. "Come closer. Look at this." Isamu moved to stand beside the workbench. The wood was a section of the wheel's rim, curved and smooth. "What do you see?" Masato asked. "I see a piece of wood, part of a wheel rim." "Yes, but look more carefully." "What else do you see?" Isamu looked again. At first, he saw nothing different. But as he continued observing, details began to emerge. The grain of the wood following the curve. Small variations in color where the growth rings showed different seasons in the tree's life. The exact texture left by the plane's blade. The slight warmth of the wood from being handled. "I see many details I did not notice at first," Isamu said. "Exactly. When your mind is thinking about the whole cart or about how this wheel will roll down roads you have never seen, you miss what is actually here. But when you are present with just this piece of wood, with just this moment of shaping it, the wood reveals itself to you. It shows you what it needs, where it wants to be cut, how it wants to be curved." Masato returned to his work, and Isamu returned to his stool. But now he watched differently. He tried to bring his attention fully to the present moment, to what was actually happening, rather than to his thoughts about what was happening. It was harder than it looked. His mind kept jumping away. To the future, to the past, to judgments about whether he was doing this right. But each time he noticed his mind had wandered, he gently brought it back. Not with criticism, just with a quiet return to the present. As the afternoon wore on, something began to shift. The times when his attention rested fully in the present moment grew longer. And in those moments, he noticed something unexpected. The usual background noise of his mind quieted. The constant planning, reviewing, judging, comparing. All of that faded, and what remained was simply awareness of the workshop. The sound of Masato's tools. The smell of fresh wood. The quality of light coming through the window. The sensation of breathing. When evening came and Masato set down his tools for the day, Isamu felt as if he had been on a long journey, though he had not moved from his corner. "Thank you for allowing me to observe," Isamu said. "I think I am beginning to understand what my teacher wanted me to learn." "And what is that?" Masato asked, cleaning his tools and arranging them for the next day. "That presence is not something complicated or mystical. It is simply being here with what is actually happening, rather than lost in thoughts about other times and places." Masato nodded. "The wheel I work on is never the wheels I made yesterday or the wheels I will make tomorrow. It is always this wheel, this moment of shaping. And when I am fully with this wheel, in this moment, everything I need is here. The skill in my hands, the responsiveness of the wood, the satisfaction of work done with care. Nothing is missing." He paused, looking at the partially completed wheel on his bench. "Your meditation practice is the same, is it not? You are not trying to achieve some future state of enlightenment or recapture some past moment of peace. You are simply sitting with this breath, this moment of sitting. And in that simplicity, everything is already complete." Isamu bowed deeply. "My teacher was right to send me here. The workshop is not different from the meditation hall. The wheel is not different from the breath. Both are simply opportunities to practice being where we actually are." As he walked back to his temple that evening, Isamu noticed something new. The path beneath his feet. The cooling air. The first stars appearing. Each step was complete in itself, requiring nothing more than presence. The way was not leading somewhere else. The way was here, happening now, step by step. Just like Masato shaping wood, one careful stroke at a time. This story points to something essential about the nature of awareness and presence. We spend so much of our time not where we actually are. Our bodies may be in one place, but our minds are scattered across memory and imagination. We are planning what comes next, reviewing what already happened, judging whether this moment is good enough, comparing it to other moments, wishing it were different. All of this mental activity creates a sense of fragmentation. We feel divided because our attention is divided. Part of us is here, what is actually available in this moment because we are busy thinking about moments that are not actually happening. Masato's way of working demonstrates a different possibility. When attention rests fully with what is actually present, several things occur. First, the quality of the work improves. Not because more effort is applied, but because attention is not wasted on anything except the task at hand. Second, the work itself becomes more satisfying. Not because the task has changed, but because you are actually experiencing it rather than thinking about it. Third, a quality of ease emerges. Not the ease of laziness, but the ease of alignment. When you are fully engaged with what you are doing, there is no internal conflict, no part of you pulling in other directions. This is not about forcing concentration or gritting your teeth to maintain focus. That kind of effortful attention quickly becomes exhausting. What Masato demonstrates is something gentler, a willingness to be where you are, a preference for presence over mental wandering. And when you notice you have wandered, which you will countless times, a simple return without self-judgment. The wheelwright's point about the wood revealing itself when you are truly present touches something profound. Reality shows you things when you actually look at it. Not glancing at it while thinking about something else, but really observing what is here. The details emerge. The subtle variations. The actual nature of things rather than your habitual assumptions about them. This applies to everything in your experience. A conversation becomes richer when you are actually listening rather than planning what to say next. Food tastes more complex when you are actually tasting it rather than eating while distracted. Even difficult emotions become more workable when you can be present with them rather than immediately trying to escape into thoughts about why they should not be happening. The present moment is not some special state you need to achieve. It is simply where life actually occurs. The past exists only in memory. The future exists only in imagination. But this moment, this breath, this sensation, this sound, this is real. This is happening. And when you can rest your attention here, even briefly, you discover that this moment contains everything you actually need. Not everything you want, perhaps. Not everything you hope for or fear. But everything you need to be alive and aware right now. Your breath is here. Your body is here. The world around you is here. And you, the awareness that knows all of this, you are here. Nothing is missing from this moment except the things you are adding with thought. Isamu's discovery that the workshop and the meditation hall are the same points to the universality of this teaching. Presence is not location-specific. It is not reserved for quiet temples or special conditions. It is available wherever you are, whatever you are doing. Washing dishes can be meditation. Walking can be meditation. Working can be meditation. Not because these activities have special spiritual properties, but because they are opportunities to practice being present with actual experience rather than lost in mental commentary about experience. The wheel that Masato shapes is complete in each moment of its shaping. It is not incomplete, waiting to become a finished wheel. In this moment of cutting, it is perfectly a piece of wood being cut. In this moment of sanding, it is perfectly a piece of wood being sanded. Each stage is complete in itself. The finished wheel will be complete when it exists, but it does not make the earlier stages incomplete. Your life works the same way. You are not incomplete, waiting to become some future version of yourself. In this moment, you are complete as what you are. Not perfect. Not finished with all growth. But complete in the sense that this moment contains everything it contains, and nothing is fundamentally wrong with that. The present moment is not a stepping stone to some better moment. It is the only moment there is. And learning to be at home here changes everything. In a remote mountain valley, there lived a monk named Kenshin in a small temple overlooking the forests below. The temple was simple, just a few rooms where he practiced meditation and tended a modest garden. He had lived here for many years, choosing this isolated place not to escape the world, but to study the nature of mind without too many distractions. Kenshin had a particular practice he returned to often. He would sit on a wooden platform outside his temple and simply observe the sky. Not meditating in the formal sense, not analyzing or contemplating, just watching. Watching clouds form and dissolve. Watching the color of the sky change throughout the day. Watching birds pass overhead. Watching weather systems move through the valley. One afternoon in late summer, as Kenshin sat in his usual spot, a traveler appeared on the path leading to the temple. The traveler's name was Tomoe, and she had been wandering for months, visiting various teachers and temples, trying to find answers to questions that troubled her deeply. She was drawn to Kenshin's temple by its reputation. People in the villages below spoke of the mountain monk who understood something about the nature of mind that brought him unusual peace. Tomoe hoped he might offer guidance for her own inner turmoil. When she reached the temple grounds, she found Kenshin sitting outside, his gaze directed upward at the afternoon sky. She approached quietly and waited to be acknowledged. After a few moments, Kenshin lowered his gaze and smiled at his visitor. "Welcome. Please sit if you wish." Tomoe settled on the platform beside him, grateful for the rest after her long climb. For a while, neither spoke. They simply sat together, looking out over the valley and up at the sky. Then Tomoe noticed something. High above, a single cloud drifted alone against the deep blue. It was not part of any larger formation. Just one cloud, white and distinct, moving slowly on currents invisible from the ground. "Master Kenshin," Tomoe said, pointing upward, "do you see that cloud? The one floating by itself?" Kenshin looked and nodded. "I find myself wondering about it. Why is it alone? Why has it separated from the others? Is it lost somehow? It seems lonely." Kenshin continued observing the cloud for a long moment. "What do you notice about how the cloud appears?" he asked. "It looks solitary, isolated, as if it should be with other clouds, but somehow ended up separated. And does the cloud seem distressed by this?" Tomoe looked more carefully. The cloud drifted steadily, its edges sharp and clear. It caught the sunlight, glowing white against the blue. There was no indication of anything wrong with it. "No," she admitted. "It seems peaceful, actually. Just moving along at its own pace." "Yes," Kenshin said softly. "The cloud does not judge its position. It does not compare itself to other clouds. It does not wish it were part of a storm system or feel inadequate for being alone. It simply exists as it is, where it is, without any story about whether that is good or bad." Tomoe felt something stir in her chest. A recognition of something important, though she could not quite name it yet. "The cloud exists in this moment exactly as it is," Kenshin continued. "Tomorrow it may join with other clouds. It may grow larger or smaller. It may release its moisture as rain and cease to exist as a visible form. But none of that is happening now. Now it is simply a cloud, drifting, being what it is without resistance or complaint." "I think I understand," Tomoe said slowly. "You are suggesting that I should be like the cloud, accepting my circumstances without judgment." "Not suggesting. Simply observing what the cloud demonstrates. That existence does not require justification. That being here, as you are, is not a problem that needs solving." Tomoe looked down at her hands. "But I feel so often that I am in the wrong place. That I should be further along in my understanding. That others seem to have found peace or purpose, while I remain confused and searching. How can I not judge that?" "The judgment arises," Kenshin acknowledged. "Thoughts of comparison appear. But are you the judgment? Or are you the awareness in which the judgment appears?" This question hung in the air between them. Tomoe found herself looking inward, trying to understand what he meant. "Watch your thoughts the way you watch that cloud," Kenshin suggested gently. A thought appears. "I should be further along." Notice that you are aware of this thought. Something in you observes it arising. That awareness, that noticing, is it caught in the judgment? Or does it simply see the judgment passing through, like a cloud passing through sky? Tomoe tried this. A thought arose. "I have wasted so much time wandering without purpose." She noticed it, saw it appear in her mind like the cloud appearing in the sky. And in the noticing, there was a small gap, a space where she was not the thought, but the awareness of the thought. "You see?" Kenshin said, though she had not spoken. "The thoughts come and go. Judgments arise and fade. But that which notices them, that awareness itself, is like the sky. It holds all weather without being changed by any weather. The sky is not disturbed by storms. It is not improved by clear days. It simply is, providing space for whatever appears." They sat in silence for a while longer. The solitary cloud continued its journey across the sky, and Tomoe found herself relaxing into simply watching it, not projecting stories onto it, not using it as a metaphor for anything, just observing a cloud being a cloud. As the afternoon moved toward evening, Tomoe asked another question. "Master Kenshin, how long did it take you to learn this? To stop judging yourself and just be like the cloud?" Kenshin laughed softly. "I did not learn to stop judging. Judgments still arise. The mind creates opinions about everything. This is what minds do. But I learned to recognize that I am not my judgments. I am the awareness that observes judgments arising, existing for a moment, and dissolving. And in that recognition, the judgments lose their power to define my experience. So you still have thoughts that you are doing something wrong, or that you should be different? Sometimes, yes. The mind is very creative in its criticisms. But when a critical thought appears, I see it the same way I see that cloud. It is a temporary formation in the space of awareness. Real in its own way, but not solid. Not permanent. Not the fundamental truth of what I am. Tomoe felt something loosen in her chest. The constant pressure she had been carrying, the sense that she needed to fix herself or find the right answer or become someone different. All of that began to feel less solid, less urgent. The cloud does not try to be a better cloud, she said, almost to herself. No, it cannot be anything other than what it is in this moment. And that is enough. It is always enough. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the solitary cloud caught the light and glowed like a lantern. It was still alone, still drifting on its own path. But it seemed, if anything, more beautiful for its solitude, more distinct, more fully itself. Tomoe stayed at the temple for several days. Each day, she would sit with Kenshin and practice what he called cloud watching. Sometimes they watched actual clouds. Other times, they watched the clouds of thought and feeling that moved through inner space. The practice was always the same. Observe without adding judgment. Notice without needing to change what is noticed. Allow things to be as they are while remaining aware of them. She began to notice patterns. How often her mind created stories about what she observed. How quickly judgment arose, so quickly that she usually did not see it forming. But with practice, she started catching these movements earlier. Started recognizing the difference between direct experience and mental commentary about experience. One morning, as she prepared to continue her journey, she thanked Kenshin for his teaching. "I have taught you nothing," he said with a smile. "The cloud taught you. The sky taught you. Your own awareness taught you. I only pointed to what was already here. Then thank you for pointing." As Tomoe walked down the mountain path, she noticed her thoughts arising. Where should I go next? Did I learn enough? Should I stay longer? But now she could also notice that she was noticing. That awareness held the questions without being disturbed by them. Like sky holding weather. Like space holding form. The solitary cloud was gone from the sky, having dissolved or drifted beyond the valley. But the teaching it offered remained. That existence requires no justification. That being exactly as you are, where you are, is not a problem. That the awareness which knows all your thoughts and feelings is itself untouched by those thoughts and feelings, vast and clear and always present. This story illuminates one of the most subtle and profound aspects of Zen understanding. The difference between experiencing something and judging that experience. Between being aware and adding opinions to that awareness. Most of the time, these happen so quickly that they seem inseparable. You see something, and almost instantly, a judgment about it arises. You feel something, and immediately a story about what it means appears. But with careful attention, you can begin to notice that these are actually two distinct movements. First, there is simple awareness, direct experience of what is present. Then, almost immediately, the mind adds commentary. Good or bad? Right or wrong? Should be different or should stay the same? This commentary is not the experience itself. It is a layer of interpretation placed over experience. The cloud demonstrates this beautifully because it exists without self-interpretation. It does not have thoughts about whether it should be in a different position or take a different shape. It simply is what it is, and that is complete. It is not trying to become a better cloud or worried about whether it is clouding correctly. There is just the cloud, being a cloud, without any additional layer of judgment. Human beings can discover this same quality of being, not by eliminating judgment, which is probably impossible since the mind naturally forms opinions, but by recognizing that judgments are temporary formations in awareness, not fundamental truths. They arise, exist for a time, and dissolve. Like clouds. When Kenshin pointed to the difference between being a judgment and being aware of a judgment, he was indicating something crucial. The judgment, "I should be further along," is a thought. You can be aware of this thought. But the awareness itself is not caught in the thought. It observes the thought arising, just as you might observe a cloud appearing in the sky. The sky is not affected by the cloud. The awareness is not affected by the judgment, even though it contains the judgment. This creates a kind of freedom. Not freedom from having judgments arise, but freedom from being defined by those judgments. When a self-critical thought appears and you recognize it as a cloud passing through your mental sky, it loses its power to determine your sense of self. It is just a thought. It will pass. And what you fundamentally are, the awareness that knows thoughts, remains unchanged. This does not mean you cannot learn from thoughts or respond to useful feedback. But there is a difference between responding skillfully to information and being overwhelmed by judgmental thoughts. One comes from clarity, the other from identification with mental movements. The practice Kenshin offered is simple but profound. Watch your inner experience the way you might watch clouds. Not to change what appears. Not to push away difficult thoughts or cling to pleasant ones. Just to observe with some measure of detachment. To recognize that you are the space in which these things appear, not the things themselves. This space, this awareness, has qualities worth discovering. It is vast. It can hold many different thoughts and feelings without being crowded. It is clear. It sees what arises without distortion. It is stable. It remains present regardless of what passes through it. And it is always available. You do not need to create it or achieve it. You only need to recognize it, this awareness that is already here, already observing, already providing the background against which all experience occurs. The solitary cloud was not actually alone. It was held by the sky, surrounded by air, part of larger weather systems even when appearing isolated. In the same way, your thoughts and feelings are never truly isolated. They arise within awareness. They are held by something larger than themselves. And when you can recognize this, when you can feel yourself as the sky rather than only as the clouds, a natural peace becomes available. This peace does not depend on having only pleasant thoughts or being free from judgment. It comes from recognizing your true position. You are not the passing weather of the mind. You are the awareness in which all weather occurs. And this awareness, like the sky, is fundamentally undisturbed by whatever passes through it. clear, spacious, always here, always now. In the mountains where autumn turned the maple trees to fire, there lived a Zen master named Sayuri in a small temple overlooking a valley. She was known for her direct teaching style and her skill in the traditional tea ceremony. Students came from distant provinces to study with her, drawn by stories of her clarity and compassion. One such student was a young man named Kenji. He arrived at the temple after years of studying with other teachers, reading countless texts and practicing various forms of meditation. He had accumulated much knowledge about Buddhist philosophy. He could recite sutras from memory. He could debate fine points of doctrine. But something was missing. Despite all his learning, he felt no closer to real understanding. Sayuri welcomed him warmly and invited him to stay at the temple. For the first few weeks, she asked him to simply participate in daily activities: sweeping, cooking, tending the garden, sitting in meditation with the other students. She did not offer any special teachings or private instructions, just the quiet rhythm of temple life. This puzzled Kenji. He had come seeking advanced teachings, and instead he was sweeping leaves and washing dishes. After a month, he finally approached Sayuri during the evening rest period. "Master Sayuri, I am grateful for your hospitality, but I wonder when the real teaching will begin. I have studied for many years. I am ready for deeper instruction." Sayuri looked at him with her calm, penetrating gaze. "Come to my room tomorrow afternoon. We will have tea together." The next day, Kenji arrived at the appointed time. Sayuri's room was simple. A low table, 2 cushions, a shelf with a few tea implements. She gestured for him to sit, then began preparing tea with the slow, deliberate movements of the formal ceremony. As she worked, she asked Kenji about his studies. He spoke eagerly, explaining the different teachers he had worked with, the various meditation techniques he had learned, the philosophical insights he had gathered. He talked about emptiness and form, about the nature of mind, about the path to enlightenment. His words flowed rapidly, each concept leading to the next, demonstrating the breadth of his knowledge. Sayuri listened without interrupting, continuing to prepare the tea. When she had finished, she poured the pale green liquid into a cup and offered it to Kenji. He accepted it with a bow and set it aside, continuing his explanation of his understanding. Sayuri then picked up the teapot and began pouring more tea into his cup. The cup filled to the brim, but she kept pouring. The tea spilled over the edge, running across the table toward Kenji's robes. "Master, stop," Kenji said, pulling back. "The cup is full. It cannot hold any more." Sayuri set down the teapot and looked at him steadily. "Like this cup, you are full. Full of opinions, full of concepts, full of your previous learning. How can I offer you anything new when there is no space to receive it?" Kenji felt something shift in his chest. He looked down at the overflowing cup, tea still dripping from the table's edge. "I came here to learn," he said quietly. "But I have been so busy showing you what I already know that I have not been open to what you might teach." "It is not just with me," Sayuri said gently. "You approach everything this way. You see through the lens of what you already understand. You hear through the filter of what you already believe. Your mind is so full of knowledge that there is no room for direct experience." She wiped up the spilled tea with a cloth, Tell me, Kenji, when you drank tea just now, did you taste it? Kenji realized he had not even sipped the tea she had served him. He had been too busy talking to actually drink it. This is how you move through life, Sayuri continued. So occupied with what you think you know that you miss what is actually present. The taste of tea, the sound of rain on the roof, the feeling of breath moving in your body. All of this is here, available, real, but you are too full to receive it. Over the following days, Sayuri gave Kenji a practice. Before each activity, before each conversation, before each moment of study, he was to pause and notice how full his cup was. Notice how quickly his mind jumped to what it already knew, how rapidly it formed opinions and judgments, how automatically it categorized new information according to old patterns. At first, Kenji found this discouraging. He noticed how rarely he was actually open, how constantly his mind was churning with previous knowledge, comparing everything new to something old. Even when Sayuri spoke to him directly, he found himself halfway through her sentences already formulating his response based on assumptions about what she would say. But gradually, something began to change. As he became more aware of his fullness, he started to notice small gaps. Moments when his mind was not immediately rushing to categorize or judge. Brief spaces of simple receptivity. And in those gaps, he found something surprising. The world became more vivid. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds clearer. Even the taste of simple temple food revealed complexity he had never noticed. It was as if he had been experiencing everything through a veil, and now occasionally the veil lifted, revealing the directness of actual experience. One morning, as he was sweeping the temple courtyard, Sayuri approached him. "Tell me what you are learning," she said. Kenji paused, leaning on his broom. He almost began his usual kind of answer, full of concepts and analysis. But then he caught himself. He emptied his cup. And what emerged was simpler. "I am learning that I do not know very much. And that not knowing allows me to actually see." Sayuri smiled. "Now we can begin." The teaching that followed was unlike anything Kenji had experienced with his previous teachers. Sayuri did not give him more information to fill his mind. Instead, she helped him develop the capacity to empty it, to create space, to become receptive rather than full. She taught him that wisdom is not accumulation, but subtraction. That understanding comes not from adding more concepts, but from releasing the ones that block direct seeing. That the beginner's mind, empty and open, perceives more clearly than the expert's mind, full and certain. Months later, when it was time for Kenji to leave and return to his home province, Sayuri performed the tea ceremony with him one final time. She poured tea into his cup. He watched it fill, approaching the brim. And this time, he noticed how the tea received whatever shape the cup provided. How it conformed to its container without resistance. How it remained fully itself while taking the form of its circumstances. "Be like this tea," Sayuri said. "Empty enough to receive what comes. Flexible enough to take the shape that is needed. But always fully yourself, always pure, always clear." Kenji bowed deeply, holding his cup with both hands. This time, he tasted the tea. Really tasted it. And in that taste, he found everything he had been seeking through all his years of study. Not a concept to grasp. Not an idea to understand. just the direct, immediate reality of this moment. This tea, this breath, this presence. This story points to one of the most common obstacles in spiritual development and in life generally. The obstacle of being too full. We accumulate ideas, beliefs, opinions, knowledge, and experiences. We build up our understanding of how things are. And all of this accumulation, while valuable in its way, can become a barrier to fresh perception. When you approach each moment already knowing what it will be, you cannot actually meet what it is. Your preconceptions shape your experience before the experience even arrives. You see what you expect to see. You hear what you are prepared to hear. You experience confirmation of what you already believe. And in this way, life becomes increasingly stale, repetitive, predictable. Not because life itself has become predictable, but because you are experiencing your thoughts about life rather than life itself. The full cup cannot receive new tea. This is not a metaphor. It is a simple physical reality. And the same principle applies to your mind. When your attention is completely occupied with what you already think and know and believe, there is no space for anything genuinely new to enter. Everything gets filtered through your existing framework. Everything gets translated into familiar terms, and the raw, direct nature of experience never quite reaches you. This is why beginners often learn faster than experts. The beginner's mind is relatively empty. There are fewer preconceptions blocking fresh perception. The expert's mind, full of knowledge and experience, can become rigid, so certain of what it knows that it cannot see what is actually present. Sayuri's teaching was not about rejecting knowledge or pretending to be ignorant. It was about developing the capacity to empty your cup when needed, to set aside what you think you know and meet each situation with fresh awareness, to create space between your past understanding and your present experience. This kind of openness requires a certain courage. It feels vulnerable to not know, to release your certainty, to admit that your understanding might be incomplete or even incorrect. There is safety in being full, in having your answers ready, in knowing what to expect. But this safety comes at a cost. It keeps you from genuine discovery. It prevents real learning. It closes you off from the aliveness that comes from direct contact with what is actually here. Think about how you listen to people. Are you actually hearing what they say? Or are you listening through the filter of what you already believe about them, about the topic, about yourself? Do you let their words land fresh? Or do you immediately compare what they are saying to your existing opinions? The same applies to how you experience your own emotions. When sadness arises, do you meet it directly? Or do you immediately overlay it with stories about what the sadness means, why you should not be feeling it, what you need to do to make it go away? The sadness itself is simple, direct. But the fullness of your mind about sadness creates suffering. Emptying your cup does not mean becoming blank or passive. It means creating space. Space for what is actually present to reveal itself. Space for genuine learning to occur. Space for life to surprise you, to show you something you did not expect, to teach you something your fullness would have prevented you from receiving. Kenji's discovery that the world became more vivid when he was empty points to something important. Reality is always vivid, always fresh, always new. But you miss this when you are experiencing your thoughts about reality rather than reality itself. The tea always had its full flavor. The colors were always bright. The sounds were always clear. But Kenji could not perceive this richness because his attention was occupied elsewhere. This is true in every moment of your life. Right now, there is more available to your senses than you are consciously aware of. Sounds you are not hearing. Sensations you are not feeling, greater than details you are not seeing. Not because they are not present, but because your attention is full of other things. Thoughts, plans, memories, judgments. All of this mental activity crowds out direct perception. What would it be like to approach your life with an empty cup? To wake up each morning without immediately filling your mind with concerns about the day ahead? To enter each conversation willing to hear something unexpected? To meet each emotion without already knowing what it means? To look at familiar things as if seeing them for the first time? This is the invitation of openness. Not to eliminate what you know, but to hold it lightly enough that it does not block what you do not yet know. To remain curious even about things you think you understand. To maintain some quality of wonder and receptivity regardless of how much experience you accumulate. The tea takes the shape of whatever cup it is poured into. This flexibility comes from its emptiness, its lack of fixed form. Your mind can develop this same flexibility, not having to maintain a rigid position, not having to defend what it already believes, free to receive and adapt and discover. This is the wisdom of the empty cup. In a forest known for its density, where oak and pine grew so thick that the ground remained dim even at midday, a Zen teacher named Ryota walked with one of his students. The student's name was Amy, and she had been carrying a heaviness in her heart for many weeks. Her life had become difficult. Her father was ill. Her work was demanding. A close friendship had ended badly. Each day felt like a burden she could barely carry. She came to walk with Ryota, hoping he might offer some wisdom to ease her suffering. Some teaching that would make the difficulties more bearable. They walked in silence for a while, the forest path soft beneath their feet with fallen needles and leaves. The trees rose around them like cathedral walls, their canopy blocking most of the sky. The air was cool and still, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Amy was lost in her thoughts, reviewing her problems, trying to figure out solutions, worrying about the future. Her body was walking through the forest, but her mind was far away, cycling through the same concerns that had troubled her for weeks. Then Ryota stopped walking. He stood completely still, his gaze directed to the left of the path. Amy stopped as well and followed his gaze. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Just more forest. More trees and shadows and undergrowth. But then she noticed it. A single shaft of sunlight had found its way through the thick canopy. It fell like a golden column through the dimness, illuminating a small patch of forest floor. And in that patch of light, a tiny purple flower bloomed. Just one flower, no larger than a coin, growing between the roots of a massive tree. The flower was ordinary, simple, but caught in that beam of sunlight, it glowed as if lit from within. The purple petals seemed almost translucent. The yellow center radiated warmth. Against the darkness of the surrounding forest, this small flower shone like a jewel. They stood in silence, watching. The light shifted slightly as the wind moved the branches far above. The beam of sunlight wavered, dimmed, then strengthened again. The flower remained, receiving whatever light reached it, neither asking for more nor resisting when the light faded. After several minutes, Ryota spoke quietly. "What do you see?" "A flower," Amy said. "Catching the sunlight." "Look more carefully." Amy observed again. The flower was not doing anything, not striving or reaching, not trying to attract the light or lamenting when clouds briefly blocked it. It was simply existing in its place, and when the light arrived, it received that light fully. When the light dimmed, it remained itself, whole and complete, even in shadow. "The flower does not worry whether it will receive light again," Ryota said softly. "It does not spend its energy thinking about all the dark places in the forest where light never reaches. It simply exists here, in this moment, and when light comes, it receives that light fully." Amy felt tears prick her eyes, though she was not sure why. "This beam of light found its way through thousands of leaves," Ryota continued, "through gaps and spaces that happened to align just so. It traveled all the way from the sun to illuminate this one small flower. And the flower did not question whether it deserved this light, did not wonder why other flowers in darker places were not receiving such light. It simply accepted what was offered." He turned to look at Amy. "Your heart is heavy. Your life holds real difficulties. But in this moment, standing here, breathing this air, seeing this flower, what is actually wrong?" Amy opened her mouth to list her problems, but something stopped her. In this moment, in this breath, what was actually happening? Her father's illness existed, but it was not happening right now on this path. Her work stress was real, but it was not present in this forest. The ended friendship was painful, but that pain was a memory, not this moment. What was actually present was the cool air, the forest scent, the sound of her own breathing, the sight of a flower receiving light. And none of these things were problems. They were simply what was here. "But the problems still exist," she said quietly. "Even if I am not thinking about them right now, they are still real." "Yes," Ryota agreed. "They are real. But they are not happening in this moment. This moment contains only what it contains. And when you can be present with this moment, you might discover that it holds something your worry has been blocking you from seeing." They continued walking, moving deeper into the forest. But Amy found her attention drawn outward now, rather than inward. She noticed more shafts of light breaking through the canopy. Small clearings where wildflowers grew. The pattern of moss on tree trunks. The sound of a stream somewhere ahead. How much had she been missing while lost in her thoughts? How many moments of simple beauty had passed unnoticed because her mind was occupied elsewhere? They reached a place where the path crossed a small stream. Ryota knelt beside the water and cupped his hands to drink. Amy did the same. The water was cold and clear, tasting of stone and earth. As she drank, she realized she could not remember the last time she had really tasted water. Usually she drank while thinking about other things. But this water, this moment of drinking, was complete in itself. "Your problems are real," Ryota said, settling on a smooth rock beside the stream. "I do not suggest you ignore them or pretend they do not matter. But when your mind is completely occupied with those problems, you miss what is actually available in each moment. You miss the light breaking through. You miss the flower blooming. You miss the taste of water and the sound of streams and the presence of your own breath. But how does noticing these things help with my actual problems? Perhaps it does not help solve them, but it reveals something important, that your life is not only your problems, that even in difficult times, moments of simple joy are available. That suffering is real, but it is not the only reality. There is also this stream, this rock, this sky visible through the trees. All of this is equally real. Amy sat beside him, listening to the water move over stones. A bird called from somewhere in the canopy. A breeze stirred the leaves. And for just a moment, the weight she had been carrying seemed to lighten. Not because her problems had disappeared, but because she remembered there was more to her life than those problems. They stayed by the stream for a while, not talking, just sitting, being present with what was actually here rather than lost in thoughts about what was elsewhere. And gradually, Amy felt something shift. Not a solution to her difficulties, but a recognition that she could meet those difficulties from a different place. Not from exhaustion and overwhelm, but from this quiet center where simple things remained beautiful despite everything. When they finally stood to return to the temple, Amy thanked Ryota for his teaching. "I taught you nothing," he said with a gentle smile. "The flower taught you. The light taught you. The water taught you. I only helped you notice what was already here." As they walked back through the forest, Amy found herself seeing differently. The same trees, the same shadows. But her attention was present with what was actually here rather than lost in worry about what was elsewhere. And in that presence, she found something she had been seeking without knowing it. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom within difficulty. Not the absence of problems, but the recognition that problems do not occupy every moment. That joy can exist alongside suffering. That light still breaks through, even in the darkest forest. This story speaks to something essential about how we experience difficult periods in our lives. When facing challenges, it is natural for your mind to become completely absorbed in those challenges. You wake up thinking about your problems. You carry them through your day. You go to sleep worrying about them. The difficulties become the lens through which you see everything. But this total absorption in problems creates a kind of tunnel vision. You begin to believe that your life is only these problems, that nothing else exists or matters, that every moment is colored by this difficulty. And in this state, you lose contact with the parts of your life that remain untouched. The simple things that continue to offer beauty and nourishment despite whatever else is happening. The flower in the forest was not pretending the surrounding darkness did not exist. The darkness was real. Most of the forest floor remained in shadow. But the flower did not refuse to receive light because other places were dark. It did not feel guilty for blooming when other seeds never germinated. It simply existed where it was, and when light came, it accepted that light fully. This is not about toxic positivity or pretending your problems do not matter. Your difficulties are real. Your pain is valid. But they are not the totality of your experience. Even in the midst of serious challenges, there are still moments that contain simple goodness. The taste of food, the feeling of warm water, the sight of sky, the sound of laughter. These things continue to exist, continue to be available, even when your life also holds pain. When you can be present with what is actually happening in this moment, rather than lost in thoughts about all your problems, you might discover that this moment is often more bearable than the story your mind tells about your life. The story includes all your difficulties, past and future, all your worries about what might happen, all your regrets about what did happen. Story about your life, what is the actual quality of experience? This is not to minimize real suffering, but it points to how much additional suffering we create through constant mental rehearsal of our difficulties, through living in our problems rather than in our actual moments. The problems are real, but the time spent worrying about them when you could be tasting water or seeing flowers, that time is a choice. Ryota's question to Amy was precise. In this moment, what is actually wrong? Not denying that problems exist elsewhere, but asking about the reality of this moment. And this moment, like most moments when you examine them directly, often contains more simplicity than your thoughts about your life suggest. The shaft of light finding its way through the dense forest is like those moments of simple joy that break through even difficult periods. A kind word from a stranger, a moment of unexpected laughter, the pleasure of stretching your body. These moments come not because you have solved your problems, but because they are part of the texture of life, regardless of what else is happening. When you notice these moments, really receive them like the flower receives light, they do not solve your problems. But they remind you that your capacity for joy has not been destroyed by difficulty, that your life still holds beauty alongside struggle, that you are not only the person with problems, you are also the person who can taste water and see flowers and feel sunlight on your skin. This recognition can change how you carry your difficulties, not making them disappear, but giving you a place to rest. A reminder that you are larger than your problems, that your life contains more than trouble, that even in the darkest forest, light finds a way through. The flower does not refuse light because it knows darkness will return. It receives what comes when it comes. And you can develop this same receptivity, this same willingness to let moments of simple pleasure touch you even when your life also holds pain. Not denying the pain, but not denying the pleasure either. Letting both be true because both are true. Your breath right now is one of those beams of light. Simple, always available, neither solving your problems nor requiring their absence. Just here, moving in and out, moment by moment. And in the spaces between your thoughts about your life, there is life itself. Present, immediate, available. Waiting not for your problems to end, but for your attention to arrive. In a valley where mist rose from the ground each morning like breath from sleeping earth, there grew a young bamboo beside a river. The bamboo was not yet tall, only a few seasons old, but already it showed the distinctive straight growth and segmented form of its kind. It stood on the riverbank, its roots reaching into the rich soil, its leaves catching whatever light filtered through the larger trees around it. The river that flowed beside the bamboo was ancient. It had carved this valley over countless years, shaping stone and earth with patient persistence. The water was clear enough to see smooth rocks on the bottom, and it moved with a steady current that never ceased, even in the deepest winter when ice formed along its edges. The bamboo was fascinated by this river. Unlike the bamboo, which remained rooted in one place, the river was always moving, always going somewhere. Yet it also seemed to remain completely itself. Water flowing past at this moment was different water than had flowed past a moment ago, yet the river continued, recognizable and constant. One night, under a moon so bright it painted everything silver, the bamboo heard a voice. It seemed to come from the river itself, though that should have been impossible. Rivers do not speak. Yet the voice was there, gentle as the current, asking a question. "Why do you watch me so closely, young bamboo?" The bamboo rustled its leaves in surprise. Had it been watching? Yes, it realized. For all the time it had been growing here, its attention had been drawn again and again to the flowing water. "I watch because I wonder," the bamboo answered, not entirely sure if it was really speaking or only imagining this conversation. "You are always moving, yet you never seem lost. You are always changing, yet you remain yourself. How is this possible?" The river made a sound like quiet laughter, or perhaps it was just water moving over stones. "I remain myself by changing. If I tried to stay the same, to hold the same water in the same place, I would become a pond. Stagnant. Separate from what I truly am." "But where do you go?" the bamboo asked. "Where does all this water travel?" "Everywhere," the river replied. "To the sea, where I become part of something larger. Into the sky, where I become rain. Back to the mountains, where I become snow. Into the roots of trees and the bodies of animals. I flow through many forms, many places, many expressions. But I remain water, remain flow, remain myself." The bamboo swayed gently in the night breeze, considering this. "I cannot move like you. I am rooted here. I grow in only one direction. I seem to have only one form." "Look at yourself more carefully," the river suggested. "Do you think you are only what you see?" The bamboo became very still, turning its attention inward. Its roots spread through the earth, drinking water and nutrients. Its hollow stems carried those nutrients upward. Its leaves breathed in sunlight and air, transforming them into growth. Even standing still, the bamboo was full of movement, full of transformation. "I see," the bamboo said slowly. "I am also flowing. Just in a different way. Yes. And your form is not fixed either. Your fibers could become many things. A flute for making music. A brush for painting. A pole for lifting water. A fence for protecting a garden. Your potential is not limited to being bamboo in this place. Like me, you can flow through many forms. But that would mean being cut down, being separated from my roots. Does that trouble you?" The bamboo thought about this. Yes, part of it wanted to remain exactly as it was. Safe. Rooted. Growing predictably upward year by year. But another part recognized something in what the river was saying. A truth about the nature of existence that went deeper than its fear of change. "You face stones in your path," the bamboo observed, watching the water flow around a large rock. "Do you mind them?" Mind them? The river repeated. They are part of my path. I learn from them. The stone teaches me new ways of moving. Water that flows around obstacles becomes stronger, more skilled at finding its way. If my path were only smooth sand, I would learn nothing. The bamboo noticed how the water divided when it met the stone, flowing around both sides, then reuniting on the other side. The river did not stop, did not complain, did not insist the stone should not be there. It simply found its way through, adapted its course, and continued flowing. And when you reach the sea? The bamboo asked. Do you cease to be a river? I become part of something larger. The river form dissolves, but the water continues. In waves, in currents, in the bodies of fish, in the air above the ocean. The form changes, but nothing is lost. I am still water, still flowing, still myself in a deeper sense than any single form can contain. A breeze moved through the valley, and the bamboo swayed with it. For the first time, it felt this swaying not as something happening to it, but as something it was participating in. The wind and the bamboo were flowing together, meeting each other, creating movement through their interaction. I think I understand, the bamboo said. I have been seeing myself as a fixed thing, but I am actually a process. Like you. I am bambooing, not just bamboo. Growing, changing, transforming, even while appearing to stand still. Now you see clearly, the river said. Nothing stands still. Everything flows. The question is not whether you will change, but whether you will resist that change or flow with it. Resistance creates suffering. Flow creates life. The bamboo grew quiet, absorbing this teaching. Above, the moon continued its arc across the sky. The river continued its journey toward the sea. And the bamboo, rooted yet flowing, began to understand itself differently. Not as a thing that might someday be cut down and lose its form, but as a continuous process of transformation that would continue regardless of what form it took. As seasons passed, the bamboo grew taller and stronger. Its roots spread deeper. Its leaves multiplied. But now it understood that this growth was not different from the river's flow. Both were expressions of the same principle. Life does not stand still. It moves, adapts, transforms, continues. One day, a craftsman came to the valley. He saw the bamboo, now tall and mature, and recognized its quality. He cut several stems carefully, respectfully, leaving roots intact so new growth could emerge. As the bamboo felt itself being separated from its root, it remembered the river's teaching. This was not an ending. This was a transformation. A new form emerging from the old. The bamboo stems would become tools, instruments, useful objects that would serve purposes the rooted bamboo never could. And from the roots, new shoots would grow, continuing the cycle. Years later, one of those stems had become a flute. A musician held it to her lips and blew gently. The air moved through the hollow bamboo, creating sound. Music emerged. The bamboo had become song, had become beauty expressed in a completely different form. But it was still bamboo, still itself in its essence, just flowing through another expression, another way of being in the world. The river had taught well. Nothing is lost in transformation. Everything continues, just in new forms. and the bamboo that had learned to flow like water had discovered something profound about the nature of all existence. That change is not the enemy of identity, but its expression. That transformation is not loss, but continuation. That life itself is the endless flowing of all things through forms too numerous to count, each form temporary, but the flowing eternal. This story illuminates one of the most liberating insights in Zen understanding: the recognition that you are not a fixed thing, but a flowing process. Most of the time, you experience yourself as a solid, stable entity that moves through time and circumstance. You think of yourself as this particular person with these particular characteristics, and change feels like something that threatens your identity. But what if your identity is not fixed? What if the sense of being a stable self is actually a useful fiction, a story your mind tells to create continuity, but not the deepest truth? The river teaches that identity can be held more loosely, that you can remain yourself while flowing through many forms, many circumstances, many expressions. Think about how much you have already changed. Your body has completely replaced most of its cells many times over. Your thoughts are different than they were 10 years ago. Your preferences have evolved. Your understanding has deepened. Your circumstances have shifted. In what sense are you the same person you were as a child? Yet there is also continuity, a thread of awareness that has witnessed all these changes. This is the paradox the river helps resolve. You are both changing and continuous. Like water that flows through many forms while remaining water, you flow through many experiences, many phases, many versions of yourself, while something essential continues. Not a fixed self, but a continuous process of being aware, of experiencing, of flowing. The bamboo's fear of being cut down represents your own fear of major life changes. Losing a job, ending a relationship, moving to a new place, aging. These changes can feel like threats to your identity, like losing who you are. But what if they are simply new forms? New expressions of the same essential process that has been flowing through your entire life? When the bamboo became a flute, it did not cease to be bamboo. It became bamboo in a new form, serving a new purpose. Not lose yourself. You become yourself in a new way. The form changes, but the essence continues. This understanding brings freedom because it releases you from the exhausting effort of trying to remain the same, of trying to hold your life in a fixed pattern, of resisting the natural flow of change that moves through everything. When you understand that you are water, not a particular container, then taking new shapes becomes natural rather than threatening. The river's teaching about obstacles is equally important. Stones in the path are not problems to eliminate, but opportunities to develop skill. Water that only flows over smooth surfaces never learns the flexibility and strength that comes from navigating difficulty. It is the same with your life. The challenges you face, the obstacles you encounter, these are not evidence that something is wrong. They are part of the natural landscape through which your life flows. When you meet difficulty with the river's attitude, something changes. Instead of demanding that obstacles should not be there, you can ask what this particular obstacle might teach you. How might flowing around this stone make you more skillful? What new capacity might develop through meeting this challenge? The obstacle does not disappear, but your relationship with it transforms from resistance to curiosity. The bamboo's discovery that it was already flowing, even while appearing still, points to something subtle. Change is not something that happens to you. It is what you are. Every breath transforms your body's chemistry. Every thought changes your brain's structure. Every experience shapes your perception. You are always in motion, always transforming, always flowing. The only question is whether you recognize this and work with it, or resist it and create unnecessary friction. There is grief in letting go of forms. When the bamboo was cut, there was a genuine ending. That particular rooted bamboo would not grow taller in that place. This is real loss, and the natural sadness of endings is appropriate. But beneath the sadness, there can also be recognition that nothing is truly lost. The potential that was contained in the rooted bamboo continues in the flute. New bamboo grows from the roots. The cycle continues, and what seemed like an ending was also a beginning. Your own life contains many such endings and beginnings. Jobs end and new work begins. Relationships change form. Health shifts. Capabilities evolve. Each transition contains genuine loss of the previous form. But when you can see yourself as the flowing rather than as the form, these changes become less catastrophic. The form was always temporary. The flowing continues. This does not mean you should not care about forms or become detached from your life. The river cares about its banks, adapts to the landscape, expresses itself fully within whatever form it temporarily takes. You can love your current form, engage fully with your present circumstances, while also understanding that this form is not permanent. That caring and holding lightly are not opposites, but can exist together. The musician playing the flute is creating beauty that the rooted bamboo never could. This is not better or worse than being bamboo in the ground. It is different. And this difference expands what bamboo can be, what bamboo can offer to the world. Your own transformations work similarly. Each new form allows new expressions, new contributions, new ways of participating in life, not because the old form was inadequate, but because life is generous enough to explore many possibilities through you. In a monastery perched on a mountainside, where stone paths wound between buildings and gardens, a young monk named Ichiro walked the same route every morning. His task was simple. He would rise before dawn, make his way from the sleeping quarters to the meditation hall, then continue to the kitchen to help prepare the morning meal. He had walked this path hundreds of times. Every stone was familiar. Every turn expected. The path itself was ancient, worn smooth by generations of monks making this same journey. It wound around boulders too large to move, dipped into a small hollow where water sometimes collected after rain, then climbed gently toward the kitchen building. In spring, cherry blossoms fell on the stones. In autumn, maple leaves collected in the corners. In winter, ice made the smooth stones treacherous. Ichiro walked this path with his mind often elsewhere, planning his day, reviewing his studies, sometimes caught in worries or hopes. His feet knew the way without conscious attention, so his mind was free to wander wherever it wished. One morning in late autumn, the first frost had arrived overnight. The air was cold and sharp. Leaves that had fallen the previous evening were now stiff and brittle. As Ichiro walked his familiar route, his mind was occupied with a conversation he had had the day before. Another monk had criticized his meditation posture, suggesting he was not progressing as quickly as he should. The criticism had stung. Ichiro was replaying the conversation in his mind, thinking of better responses he could have given, judging himself for being hurt by such a small comment. His attention was completely absorbed in these thoughts. His body was walking, but he was not present with the walking. His foot came down on a large stone that had somehow appeared in the middle of the path. A stone he had never noticed before, though it must have always been there. Or perhaps it had been dislodged from the path's edge and rolled into the center. Regardless, it was there now, and Ichiro's foot struck it hard. He stumbled forward, catching himself before falling fully, but the impact jarred him completely out of his thoughts. His knee hurt. His pride was bruised. He stood there in the dim pre-dawn light, looking down at the stone that had interrupted his walk. His first impulse was immediate and clear. He should move this stone, put it aside so it would not trip him again tomorrow, so it would not trip anyone else. The path should be smooth and safe. This stone was an obstacle that needed to be removed. He bent down, ready to roll the stone off the path. But something made him pause. A question arose in his mind, unexpected and not entirely his own. As if his teacher were standing beside him asking, "Why is this stone here?" Ichiro straightened up, still looking at the stone. Why was it here? Because it had rolled or been kicked into the path. That was the obvious answer. But the question seemed to be asking something deeper. He thought about his stumble, how it had jolted him completely out of his mental spiral. How, for the first time that morning, he was fully present on this path, fully aware of where he was. The stone had interrupted his distraction, had brought him back to this moment, this place, this actual experience of walking. If he removed the stone, the path would be smooth again. Tomorrow he would walk it without obstacle, his mind free to wander wherever it wished. He would return to moving through this space without really being present in it. The stone would be gone, and so would this moment of unexpected awareness. Another thought arrived. This stone could teach others what it had just taught him. The monk who walked this path tomorrow might also be lost in thought, might also need to be brought back to presence. The stone could serve that monk just as it had served him. But what if someone was injured? What if an older monk with poor eyesight tripped and fell seriously? Then removing the stone would be an act of compassion, not just convenience. Ichiro stood there for a long time, aware that this decision about a stone had become something larger. He was learning something about obstacles, about difficulty, about the difference between helpful intervention and the impulse to make everything smooth and easy. He remembered something his teacher had said. The path that contains no obstacles teaches nothing. Safety is valuable, but so is awareness. Sometimes a stone in the path is a greater gift than a smooth road. He decided to leave the stone, but not just to leave it. He chose to recognize it as a teacher. Tomorrow morning when he walked this path, he would remember this stone was here. He would step carefully over it. And in that careful stepping, he would be present rather than distracted. The stone would serve as a reminder to bring his attention to where he actually was. As he continued toward the kitchen, Ichiro thought about other obstacles in his life. The criticism that had hurt him, the difficulty of his studies, the challenges of living in close community with others. His natural impulse was always to try to remove these obstacles, to defend himself against criticism. to find easier subjects to study, to avoid people who irritated him. But what if these obstacles were also teachers? What if his hurt feelings about criticism were showing him attachment to being seen as competent? What if difficult studies were developing patience and persistence? What if irritating people were offering opportunities to practice equanimity? He did not need to seek out obstacles. They arrived naturally, like this stone appearing in his path. But when they appeared, he could choose how to meet them. With resentment that they should not be there, or with curiosity about what they might teach. Days passed. Each morning, Ichiro walked the path and stepped carefully over the stone. Each time, it brought him present. He began to appreciate this stone, this teacher that asked nothing of him except awareness. Other monks began to notice it. Some moved it aside without thinking. But it would always reappear, rolled back into place by rain or by someone who understood its purpose. It became a kind of informal teaching tool. The monks who walked mindlessly would trip. The monks who walked with presence would step over it easily. One morning, Ichiro's teacher, Master Sato, was walking behind him. He watched Ichiro step carefully over the stone, then heard the younger monk greet it quietly. "Good morning, teacher." After they had passed, Master Sato smiled and asked, "The stone is your teacher now?" "Yes, Master. It teaches me to be present, to watch where I place my feet, to not walk through my life lost in thought." "And you choose to leave it there, even though it might be called an obstacle?" "I choose to leave it there because it is an obstacle. The obstacle is the teaching." Master Sato nodded approvingly. Most people spend their lives trying to create perfectly smooth paths, removing every difficulty, avoiding every challenge. And in doing so, they remove the very things that could wake them up, that could teach them to be truly alive and aware. Should we never remove obstacles then? Ichiro asked. Should we never make things easier? That is the wrong question. The right question is, what does this particular obstacle teach? What awareness does it invite? And if you remove it, what do you also remove? They walked together in silence for a while. Then Master Sato added, some obstacles should be removed. If a tree falls across the path and blocks everyone's passage, removing it is appropriate. If a dangerous hole opens, filling it is wise. Use judgment. But do not automatically assume that every difficulty should be eliminated. Sometimes the obstacle is exactly what is needed. Years later, when Ichiro had become a teacher himself, he would often walk new students along that path and watch to see what they did when they encountered the stone. Some would move it aside without hesitation, eager to fix what seemed wrong. Others would step over it without noticing much. But occasionally, a student would pause, would look at the stone with real attention, would perhaps even thank it quietly before continuing. These were the students who understood that obstacles are not interruptions to the path. They are the path. The smooth sections teach you nothing new. You learn to walk there in your sleep, your mind elsewhere, your body on automatic. But the difficult sections wake you up, demand your attention, teach you balance and care and presence. The stone remained on that path for many years, serving anyone who was ready to learn from it. A reminder that life does not become easier by removing every difficulty. It becomes richer by learning to meet difficulty with awareness, by recognizing that what appears to be in your way might actually be showing you the way. This story speaks to one of the most common patterns in human experience: the automatic assumption that obstacles should be removed. That difficulty is a problem requiring solution. That the ideal life would be one where everything flows smoothly without resistance or challenge. This assumption is so deep that you rarely question it. When you encounter difficulty, your immediate response is to figure out how to eliminate it, get around it, or at least minimize its impact. The idea that you might simply meet the difficulty with presence, might learn from it, might even be grateful for it, runs counter to your conditioning. But Zen teaching suggests something different. That obstacles are not separate from your path, but are your path. That the challenges you face are not interruptions to your life, but are essential to your life. That difficulties teach things that ease cannot teach. Think about what you actually learn in life. You learn compassion through experiencing suffering. You learn patience through encountering delays and frustrations. You learn strength through facing challenges that require effort. You learn creativity through meeting limitations that demand new solutions. All of these learnings come through difficulty, not despite it. The smooth path teaches you nothing new. When everything is easy, when circumstances arrange themselves perfectly, when no resistance is met, you move on automatic. Your habitual patterns run unchallenged. Your comfort zone remains unchallenged. You continue as you have always continued, never developing new capacities. But put a stone in that smooth path, and suddenly everything changes. You must pay attention, must adjust your step, must be present with where you are rather than lost in thought about where you are going. The obstacle brings you back to awareness, back to this moment, back to presence. This does not mean you should seek out difficulty or create unnecessary obstacles. The stone appeared naturally, as difficulties tend to do in life. You do not need to go looking for challenges. They find you. But when they arrive, you can choose to see them as teachers rather than only as problems. Ichiro's insight about his emotional reactions is particularly valuable. When he felt hurt by criticism, his first impulse was to defend himself or avoid similar situations in the future. But what if the hurt itself was information? What if it was showing him something about his attachments, his need for approval, his identity as a good student? The emotional obstacle, met with awareness, becomes a doorway to self-understanding. This applies to all the difficulties you encounter. Physical pain teaches you about your body's limits and needs. Emotional discomfort points to places where you hold tension or false beliefs. Relationship conflicts show you patterns that need attention. Work challenges reveal capacities you did not know you possessed. Each obstacle contains information, offers teaching, invites growth. Master Sato's distinction is important. Some obstacles should be removed. A path completely blocked serves no one. A difficulty that only creates harm without teaching anything should be addressed. Wisdom involves discernment. Not removing every obstacle automatically, but also not leaving every difficulty in place out of some belief that all suffering is educational. Ask yourself about the obstacles in your own life. Which ones are you trying to remove out of genuine wisdom, and which are you trying to remove simply because they are uncomfortable? Which difficulties might be teaching you something important? Which challenges are developing capacities you will need? The stone that remained on the path served generations of monks. Some stepped over it mindlessly. Some cursed it for being there. But some were brought to presence by it, were woken up by it, were taught by it. The obstacle did not change, but the relationship to the obstacle varied completely depending on how it was met. Your own obstacles work the same way. The difficulty itself is neutral. It just is what it is. But your response to it, your quality of attention with it, your willingness to learn from it, these make all the difference between suffering that diminishes you and suffering that develops you. You cannot control what obstacles appear in your path, but you can choose how you meet them, with resistance and resentment, or with some measure of openness to what they might teach, with the assumption that they should not be there, or with the recognition that since they are there, they might as well serve as teachers. The path of your life contains smooth sections and difficult sections. Both are necessary. Both serve your development. And sometimes, the obstacles you most want to remove are the very things that are inviting you to wake up, to pay attention, to be present with your actual life rather than the fantasy of a life without difficulty. The stone remains in the path, not because removing it is wrong, but because leaving it there serves something valuable. It serves presence, awareness, the remembering that this step, this stone, this moment matters, that your life is not happening somewhere else, in some imagined future where everything is smooth. It is happening here, where the path sometimes contains obstacles that wake you up and teach you how to walk with care. High in the mountains where snow lingered even in summer, there was a lake so clear that you could see 20 feet down to the smooth stones on its bottom. The lake sat in a basin carved by ancient ice, surrounded by peaks that rose like walls on 3 sides. The 4th side opened onto a valley that descended through forests and meadows to distant villages far below. A master named Hideo lived in a simple stone shelter beside this lake. He had been there for more than 30 years, choosing this remote place not to escape the world, but to study the nature of mind in a setting that reflected its qualities. The lake was his teacher and his mirror. He spent hours each day simply sitting beside its waters, observing. One summer afternoon, a young seeker named Akira arrived at the lake after a journey that had taken weeks. He had climbed from the valley below, driven by a desperation that had been building for months. His life felt chaotic. His mind was never at rest. Thoughts spun constantly. Emotions surged and crashed like waves. He could not find any stable ground within himself. He had heard of Master Hideo from travelers who spoke of the mountain hermit, who understood something about inner peace. Akira hoped the master could teach him how to calm his turbulent mind, how to find some stability in the constant churning of his thoughts and feelings. When Akira reached the lake, he was exhausted. His legs trembled from the climb. His lungs burned from the thin air. But more than physical tiredness, he felt worn out by his own inner turmoil. He collapsed on a flat rock near where Hideo sat, watching the water. For a long time, neither man spoke. Hideo simply continued his observation of the lake, while Akira caught his breath and tried to gather himself. Eventually, Akira broke the silence. "Master Hideo, I have climbed for many days to reach you. My mind gives me no peace. Thoughts arise constantly. Emotions change without warning. I feel like I am drowning in my own inner chaos. Can you teach me how to become calm like this lake?" Hideo turned his gaze from the water to his visitor. His eyes were quiet, reflecting something of the lake's clarity. "Tell me what you see when you look at this lake," he said. Akira looked at the water. I see stillness. Perfect calm. The surface is like glass. Not a ripple disturbs it. Look more carefully. Akira observed again. At first, he saw only what he had described. But as he continued watching, he began to notice subtle movements. A light breeze created tiny ripples in one corner. A small insect touched the surface, sending out rings. The water was not perfectly still after all. I see small disturbances, Akira said. But they are minor. Nothing like the turbulence in my mind. Watch what happens when I do this, Hideo said. He picked up a stone and tossed it into the lake. It landed with a splash, and waves spread outward in expanding circles. The perfect mirror was broken. The surface became agitated, catching light in broken patterns. Akira watched the waves move across the water, hitting the shore, reflecting back, creating interference patterns. For several minutes, the lake surface was busy with movement. Now you have made it like my mind, Akira said. Disturbed. Chaotic. Keep watching. As they sat, the waves gradually diminished. The larger movements gave way to smaller ones. The interference patterns simplified. And eventually, though it took longer than Akira expected, the surface returned to its mirror-like calm. The lake looked as undisturbed as if no stone had ever been thrown. The surface has calmed, Hideo observed. But do you think the lake itself was ever disturbed? Akira looked confused. The waves were real. I saw them. The waves on the surface were real. But look deeper. Look below the surface. Akira leaned forward, peering into the clear water. Below the surface, even when the waves had been most active, the deeper water had remained relatively still. And at the very bottom, where smooth stones rested, there had been no movement at all. The turbulence existed only at the surface. The depths remained unchanged. The lake has depth, Hideo said quietly. The surface responds to everything. Wind, rain, stones thrown by passing hermits. But the depth remains stable. The bottom remains undisturbed regardless of what happens at the top. He gestured for Akira to sit beside him. Your mind is like this lake. You experience turbulence at the surface. Thoughts arise like waves. Emotions surge like currents. This is natural. This is what the surface does. But beneath this surface activity, there is depth. And in that depth, there is stillness that is never disturbed by surface waves. But I do not feel this depth, Akira said. I only feel the chaos. Because your attention is caught at the surface. You identify with the waves. You think the turbulence is all you are. But the waves are not the lake. They are movements on the lake. Temporary patterns that arise and fade. The lake itself is deeper than any wave. Hideo picked up another stone, smaller this time. Watch carefully now. He dropped it gently into the water near the shore. Small ripples spread out, but they quickly faded. A small disturbance creates small waves. A large disturbance creates large waves. But the lake's capacity to hold disturbance, the vast space of water itself, remains the same. It can hold any size wave without being destroyed by it. Akira began to understand. You are saying that I am not my thoughts and emotions. I am the awareness that holds them. not just holds them. You are the depth in which they appear. Thoughts arise in awareness like waves arising on water. They move across the surface of your mind. But the awareness itself, the vast space of consciousness in which thoughts appear, that is never disturbed by any thought. It simply witnesses, simply is. They sat together as the afternoon moved toward evening. Hideo taught Akira to shift his attention from the content of his mind to the space in which that content appeared. When a thought arose, instead of following it or fighting it, simply notice that awareness of the thought was present. When an emotion surged, instead of being swept away by it, notice that something in him was aware of the emotion. This noticing, this awareness of awareness, was like diving beneath the surface waves. At first, Akira could only maintain this depth for moments before being pulled back to identification with surface movements. But with practice, the moments grew longer. He began to feel the difference between the waves of thought and the depth that held them. The turbulence will not stop, Hideo explained. Your mind will continue generating thoughts. Emotions will continue arising. This is natural and healthy. The surface is meant to be active. But when you know yourself as the depth, when you can rest in awareness rather than being caught in the content of awareness, the surface activity stops disturbing you. It becomes something you witness rather than something you are. As the sun set, painting the peaks orange and pink, Akira felt something shift. For a moment, his usual anxiety about his inner chaos disappeared. Not because the chaos had stopped, but because he had touched something deeper. Something that existed beneath all his thoughts and feelings. Something vast and calm and unchanging. This depth has always been here, he said with wonder. I have been living at the surface my entire life, not knowing there was anything below. The depth is what you most fundamentally are, Hideo replied. Not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your story about yourself. You are the awareness in which all of that appears. Thoughts come and go. Feelings rise and fall. But the awareness that knows thoughts and feelings, that awareness is constant. It is here in childhood and old age. Present when you are happy and when you are sad. Unchanging while everything else changes. Akira stayed beside the lake for many days, learning to recognize and rest in this depth. Hideo taught him that he did not need to create calm or force his mind to be still. He needed only to recognize the stillness that already existed beneath all mental activity, to shift his identity from the waves to the water that held them. When it was time for Akira to return to the valley, he thanked Hideo for the teaching. The lake has shown me what you alone could not have explained, that I am deeper than I knew. Remember this when the valley's pressures return, Hideo said. When life creates large waves on your surface, you do not need to calm those waves. You need only to remember your depth, to touch the awareness that holds all experience without being changed by any experience. The lake is always here. The depth is always available. You need only turn your attention toward it. This teaching about the lake and its depths points to one of Zen Buddhism's most profound insights. That what you most essentially are is not the changing content of your experience, but the unchanging awareness in which experience occurs. This is not just philosophical theory. It is something you can discover directly in your own experience. Right now, you are aware of these words, aware of sounds around you, aware of sensations in your body, aware of thoughts moving through your mind. This awareness is so obvious that it is easily overlooked. You are so focused on what you are aware of that you rarely notice the awareness itself. But that awareness has remarkable qualities. It is spacious enough to hold many things simultaneously. It is clear enough to know experience directly without distortion. It is stable, remaining present even as the objects of awareness constantly change. And most importantly, it is never disturbed by what it contains. When you feel anxious, awareness knows the anxiety, but is not anxious. When you feel angry, awareness knows the anger, but is not angry. When your mind is full of chaotic thoughts, awareness witnesses that chaos, but is not chaotic. Like the lake's depth remaining still while its surface churns, your fundamental awareness remains unchanged by any mental or emotional weather. This is not something you need to create or achieve. You are already this awareness. You have always been this awareness. The only question is whether you recognize it. Whether you can shift your sense of identity from the waves to the water, from the changing content to the unchanging context. Most of the time, you are so identified with the surface that you forget the depth exists. When a difficult emotion arises, you become that emotion. When a troubling thought appears, you believe you are that thought. You live at the surface, tossed by every wave, believing the turbulence is all there is. But the depth is always here, always accessible. You do not need to go anywhere to find it, or do anything special to reach it. You need only turn your attention from what you are aware of to the awareness itself, from the object to the subject, from the content to the container. This is what meditation practices often point toward. Not creating some special state, but recognizing the ordinary awareness that is already present. The instruction to observe your breath is not about the breath. It is about discovering that something in you can observe. That there is awareness here, witnessing the breath, and that awareness is what you most fundamentally are. When you recognize this, when you can rest even briefly in awareness, rather than being caught entirely in the content of awareness, something profound shifts. The surface activity continues. Thoughts still arise. Emotions still move through you. But you are no longer defined by them, no longer tossed helplessly by them. You watch them from depth with some measure of spaciousness and perspective. This does not make difficult emotions pleasant, does not make troubling thoughts disappear, but it changes your relationship with them. They become weather moving through your inner sky rather than definitions of who you are. Temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. The lake's depth does not fight the waves, does not try to suppress them or make them go away. It simply remains itself, vast and deep, capable of holding any amount of surface activity without being disturbed. You can develop this same quality, not by fighting your thoughts and emotions, but by recognizing the awareness that is deeper than any thought or emotion. This awareness is your true home, your stable ground. The place within you that has never been broken by anything that has happened to you. And it is always available, always here, waiting patiently for you to remember and return. In a forest so old that no one could remember when the first trees were planted, there lived a gardener named Kohana. She tended a grove that was known throughout the region, not for any single magnificent specimen, but for the way all the trees seemed to grow in harmony. Oak and pine, maple and cedar, each species thriving in its own way while contributing to the whole. At the very center of this grove stood a tree that was remarkable in its appearance. Tall and broad, with thick branches that spread wide, it seemed to embody everything a tree should be. Its bark was smooth and strong. Its leaves were full and green. By any measure, it was a perfect specimen. Yet Kohana sensed something about this tree that troubled her. Despite its magnificent appearance, it seemed somehow restless. Its leaves rustled differently than those of the other trees, as if agitated by an invisible wind. Its branches stretched outward in a way that felt more like reaching than growing. There was a quality of striving about it that seemed out of place in the peaceful grove. One autumn morning, a wanderer named Haru entered the forest. He had heard of Kohana's grove and wanted to see it for himself. As he walked among the trees, he was struck by their beauty and the profound sense of harmony they created. But when he reached the center and saw the magnificent tree, he was puzzled. He found Kohana nearby, tending to some younger saplings. "Your grove is extraordinary," he said. "But I am curious about the tree at the center. It is the most impressive tree here, yet it seems somehow unsettled. Why would such a perfect tree appear troubled?" Kohana set down her tools and walked with Haru back to the central tree. They stood together, observing it in silence. "This tree has everything," Kohana said finally. "Strong roots, healthy growth, plenty of light and water. By all measures, it should be completely at peace. Yet you are right. There is restlessness here. Do you understand why?" Haru looked at the tree more carefully. He walked around its trunk, examining it from different angles. Then he stepped back and looked at how it stood in relation to the other trees around it. And slowly, he began to understand. "This tree sees itself as separate," Haru said. "It stands at the center and thinks it is alone. It does not realize it is part of something larger." "Yes," Kohana said quietly. "This tree has forgotten that it is part of the forest. It experiences itself as an individual, competing for resources, striving to be the best. It does not recognize that its roots touch the roots of every other tree here, that nutrients flow between them underground, that the forest breathes as one, shares water as one, weathers storms as one." She placed her hand on the tree's bark. "This tree thinks its leaves are separate from the leaves of that oak. It thinks its branches are in competition with the branches of that pine. It experiences isolation where there is actually profound connection. And this feeling of separation creates suffering that no amount of individual perfection can resolve." Haru considered this. How can a tree forget it is part of a forest? How can it not know what seems so obvious? "The same way a person can forget they are part of humanity," Kohana replied. "The same way a wave can forget it is part of the ocean. We focus so much on our individual form, our separate existence, that we lose sight of the larger whole we are expressing. We define ourselves by our boundaries rather than by our connections." She gestured to the grove around them. "Look at how the other trees grow. Each is fully itself, yes. Each has its own form and character. But they do not experience themselves as isolated. They grow in relationship. Their roots intertwine. Their branches create space for each other. They are individual expressions of the forest's life, not separate entities competing for survival. And this is why they seem peaceful while the central tree seems restless? Yes. When you know yourself as part of something larger, there is ease. When you experience yourself as separate and alone, there is struggle. Not because anything external is wrong, but because the very perception of separation creates suffering. Haru sat down at the base of the magnificent tree, leaning against its trunk. He had come to admire the grove, but now he was receiving a teaching he had not expected. "I think I am like this tree," he said quietly. "I have been experiencing my life as mine alone. My struggles as separate from everyone else's struggles. My joys as separate from everyone else's joys. I have been living as if I were an isolated being rather than part of something vast and interconnected." Kohana smiled gently. "Most people live this way. It is the fundamental confusion. We are taught to see ourselves as separate individuals, boundaried and distinct. And while this is true in one sense, it is not the deepest truth. The deeper truth is that we are like waves in the ocean. Each wave has its own form, its own moment of expression, but it is never separate from the ocean. It is the ocean, temporarily taking this particular shape." She knelt beside Haru, both of them now resting against the tree. This tree's roots spread far underground. They touch the roots of dozens of other trees. Through those connections, nutrients are shared. Young saplings are fed by older trees. Sick trees are supported by healthy ones. The entire forest functions as a single organism, though we see it as many separate trees. And humans are like this as well? Everything is like this. The air you breathe was just exhaled by this tree. The water in your body came from the same sky that waters this forest. The elements that make up your physical form have cycled through countless other forms before becoming you. You are not separate from the world. You are an expression of it. A temporary pattern in the vast flowing of existence. Haru felt something shift in his chest. A loosening of a tightness he had not known he was carrying. The sense of being alone, of facing life as an isolated individual, began to dissolve. He was not separate. He was part of this forest, this earth, this vast living system. So the tree's restlessness comes from forgetting this connection? Yes. And when a human forgets this connection, the same restlessness arises. You feel you must defend yourself against the world, must compete for resources, must prove your worth as an individual. All of this creates enormous stress. But when you remember you are part of the whole, when you feel your connection to all things, that stress dissolves. Not because your circumstances change, but because your relationship to your circumstances transforms. They sat in silence for a while. Above them, the tree's branches swayed in a gentle breeze. And gradually, Haru noticed something. The leaves were rustling differently now. Less agitated. More harmonious with the movement of leaves on surrounding trees. As if the tree itself was listening to this conversation. As if it too was remembering what it had forgotten. Can the tree learn this? Haru asked. Can it remember it is part of the forest? All things move toward truth eventually, Kohana said. This tree will remember. Perhaps through a winter when it depends on stored nutrients from the whole grove to survive. perhaps through a storm when it is supported by the strength of interwoven roots, perhaps through the simple passage of time and the quiet teaching of the forest itself. She stood, preparing to return to her work. And you? Will you remember? Haru stood as well. I will try, though I imagine I will forget often and need to be reminded. Yes, the illusion of separation is strong, but each time you remember, the remembering becomes easier. Each time you recognize your connection to the whole, that recognition becomes more stable, until eventually you live from that understanding rather than having to constantly remind yourself of it. As Haru prepared to leave the forest, he looked back at the magnificent tree one more time. It stood as tall and strong as before. Its individual form had not changed, but somehow it seemed different, less isolated, more integrated with the grove around it. As if becoming aware of itself as part of the forest, it could finally be at peace with being exactly what it was. This story illuminates perhaps the most fundamental misunderstanding in human experience: the belief that you are separate, that you are an isolated individual, boundaried and alone, facing the world as something external to yourself. This belief is so deeply embedded in how you have been taught to see yourself that it feels like simple fact. But Zen Buddhism suggests it is actually a profound illusion. Look carefully at what you call yourself. Your body is made of elements that came from the earth, from food you ate, from water you drank, from air you breathed. These elements are constantly being exchanged with the environment. The boundary between you and the world is not solid. It is permeable, with a constant flow in both directions. Your thoughts and feelings are shaped by your culture, your relationships, your experiences with others. The language you think in was taught to you. The values you hold were influenced by your community. Even your sense of being an individual was taught to you by other individuals. Where is the part of you that is truly separate? The tree in the story suffered from the illusion that it stood alone, but its roots touched every other tree's roots. Its leaves contributed oxygen that other creatures breathed. Its shade supported plants growing beneath it. Its fallen leaves fed soil that nourished the entire grove. It was never separate, but believing it was separate created restlessness. You experience this same restlessness when you feel isolated, when you believe you must face life's challenges alone, when you think your problems are yours alone to solve, when you imagine that success means outperforming others rather than contributing to the collective well-being. All of this comes from the fundamental confusion of seeing yourself as separate from the whole. But you are not separate. You are deeply, intimately connected to everything around you, to the people in your life, to the natural world that sustains you, to the vast web of causes and conditions that brought you into existence and continues to sustain that existence moment by moment. This is not a pleasant philosophical idea. It is something you can sense directly when you pay attention. Feel how the air moves in and out of your body. The same air that was just in the trees, that was just breathed by animals, that was just stirred by wind. There is no separation between the air inside you and the air outside you. The boundary is arbitrary, temporary, constantly being crossed. Consider your relationships. Are you truly separate from the people you love? Does their suffering not affect you? Does their joy not touch you? Are you not shaped by them, influenced by them, connected to them in ways that make the idea of being completely separate seem strange? The tree's roots intertwining with other roots is a perfect image for how you exist. You think of yourself as this discrete person, but actually you are connected to countless others through invisible threads. Economic systems that provide what you need. Social networks that shape your worldview. Ecosystems that create the air you breathe and the food you eat. You are not an island. You are a meeting point for countless connections. When you recognize this, when you can feel your connection to the larger whole, something relaxes. The burden of being a separate individual facing everything alone becomes lighter. You realize you are part of something vast and interconnected, that you are supported by systems you rarely notice, that you contribute to others even when not consciously trying, that your well-being and others' well-being are not separate concerns, but deeply intertwined. This does not mean you lose your individuality. The wave is still a wave, even while being inseparable from the ocean. You have your own form, your own expression, your own way of participating in the whole. But you are not separate from the whole. You are the whole, temporarily expressing itself as you. The tree at the center of the grove remained a magnificent tree. Its individual characteristics did not disappear when it remembered its connection to the forest. It simply stopped suffering from the illusion of separation. It could be fully itself while also being part of something larger. You can discover this same truth, not by giving up your individuality, but by recognizing that your individuality exists within vast connection. That being yourself and being part of the whole are not contradictory. That you are most fully yourself when you understand yourself as part of everything. When this understanding becomes lived rather than just intellectual, many things shift. Competition feels less urgent because you recognize that others' success is not your failure. The whole system benefits when any part thrives. Compassion becomes natural because others' suffering is recognized as connected to your own experience. Joy in others' happiness arises because you feel your connection to them. The magnificent tree could finally rest when it remembered it was part of the forest. You too can find rest in remembering you are part of the vast web of existence. Not alone, not separate, not isolated, but connected, supported, held by something infinitely larger than any individual form. As you continue to rest here, let these teachings settle into your awareness like leaves falling gently to forest floor. The stories you have heard tonight are not separate from each other, but are like branches on a single tree, each pointing toward the same truth. That peace is found not by changing what is, but by understanding what is more clearly. All of these are reflections of the same understanding, that you are not separate from life, but are life expressing itself. That difficulties are not obstacles to your path, but are the path. That the peace you seek is not something to achieve, but something to recognize. That awareness itself is the home you have been searching for. That you are already whole, already connected, already held by something vast and wise. These teachings from Zen Buddhism are not asking you to become someone different. They are inviting you to recognize what you already are beneath the layers of confusion and striving. To remember the depth beneath the surface waves. To feel your roots touching the roots of all things. To know yourself as both the individual wave and the ocean that forms all waves. Nothing needs to be grasped or held tightly. Let these insights rest in you the way moonlight rests on water. present but not grasped, clear but not forced, simply here, available whenever you turn your attention toward them. The breath continues its natural rhythm. The body settles into rest. The mind quiets in its own time and its own way. And somewhere beneath all of this, the awareness that has witnessed every moment of your life remains unchanged, spacious, and clear. Always here, always home, always complete. Thank you for walking this path tonight, for listening to these stories, for opening yourself to these ancient teachings. May they serve you well in the days to come, like seeds planted that will grow in their own time, in their own way, offering shade and shelter when you most need them. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.